What's up, everybody? It's Mike Sodini with Walk the Talk America, and I'm joined with Jake Viskirchen, fellow board member of Walk the Talk America, owner of Zephyr Wellness. And today I wanted to talk about something that a lot of people ask me about when it comes to mass shootings versus suicide prevention. So, a lot of people in the firearms community think that there is such thing as Minority Report. They believe that all we have to do is figure out ways to stop the next mass shooter,
Right.
which in turn, it's not realistic. And I want to tell people right now that when I started Walk Talk America in 2018, that was my intent. It actually had nothing to do with suicide prevention. That was going to be a part of it, but I wanted to stop the next mass shooter because I think the idea came from right off the heels of a mass shooting. It wasn't until I dove into the mental health community, started talking to people in the profession, and they were steering me back to suicide prevention. Right, but when you think about it logically, 2/3 of all firearm deaths are suicide, right?
Right.
You take that number down, you decrease it greatly. Finding the next mass shooter is like a needle in a haystack. I think our community, the 2A community, Second Amendment, gun culture, we have a hard time wrapping our head around that. It just doesn't make sense to us because we believe like there's these certain rules in life that if we follow and we look for certain cues that we could stop this. So I want to let it be known that it was the mental health community that pushed me back towards suicide prevention. Had nothing to do with the firearms community, right? But that was because I sat down, I took in the information I learned. So I want to kind of know what your thoughts are.
Well, we all know the statistics, or at least we should know at this point what the statistics are. And mass shootings account for a very small percentage, and I'm sure you'll see an infographic here as I'm talking about how that represents, and it'll probably cite CDC data from 2018. So when you talk about preventing death, which is what we really want to do, we want to keep people from dying prematurely. When you try to make a dent in a very, very small number, you can expend a great amount of energy trying to do so, and maybe you'll make an effect, and maybe you'll eliminate all of them. But when you look at 80 deaths in 2018 for mass shootings versus 40,000 deaths from suicide, well, the effort expended would make a much bigger difference in suicide prevention. You'd save way more people. Now, the hope is that it's not binary. It's not a zero-sum game that you either do this or you do that. Because my belief in my heart of hearts is that as I'm efforting to improve everyone's mental well-being, not only are we stopping suicides, we're stopping the mass shootings as well, because if people are healthy, then they don't go out and need to kill people. But also, there's a ripple effect. There are fewer divorces, there are fewer playground bullying incidents, there are fewer domestic violence incidents. So I think if we can elevate everybody's mental well-being, then overall society benefits, and we get that magic metric of eliminating more suicide deaths as well.
Right, like right now in our country, we're going through this wave of mass shootings.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and we're filming this just so the audience knows in April of 2021, and it's really alarming. Now, granted, there's some alarmingness to that driven by media, and media make their money by clicks, by advertisements, and that's historical across 400 years. How do you sell a newspaper? You shout out a headline and people pick it up and buy it, and then the more people pick it up and buy it, you can sell those metrics to your advertisers, who would ostensibly get their product noticed by the people who pick it and buy it, right?
Right, absolutely. And the thing that people need to understand, and why our focus on suicide prevention, is we have over 60 people that take their lives every day,
Right.
with a firearm.
With a firearm. That's not people who take their lives every day. That's just people who take their lives with a firearm.
Right. So when this all stops, when everything calms down, the media forgets about these mass shootings, we will still live this every day.
Correct.
So for Walk the Talk America, there's a mass shooting every day.
Every single day. And it's not just a mass shooting. It's a mass shooting that's roughly equivalent to all mass shootings of 2018. We don't have 2019 data yet. 2020 data actually suggests that mass shootings went down to the almost a negligible number of near zero. But think about that: 60 deaths or more, because I think the most recent numbers were like 62-ish or 65-ish a day. If you stop 2 days worth of a 365-day calendar's worth of deaths, you've covered all the mass shootings in lives saved. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think one of the things that the firearms community has an issue with, because you're hearing us, right? You hear us say, we can't just blame mental health. Okay? We can't pass the ball to mental health. Say it's only a mental health issue. So, as someone from the community, I understand when you come to me and you say, well, if it's not mental health, what is it, Mike? Right? And then I think it begs a bigger question. The difference between evil, right, and mental health, and how that all encompasses everything that happens when it comes to a firearm.
We're trying to be super professional here, but I have to call you out on the use of begging the question, and if I didn't call you out, some of my mentors would excoriate me. For the listening audience, begging the question literally means circular logic, where you posit something like you're watching this video, therefore you must like videos, and because you're watching the video, you like videos. That's begging the question. What Mike means is raising the question.
Raising the question.
Which
That's
is
my
fine.
Arizona State University.
That's okay. The University of Nevada, which is also a land grant institution, is clearly superior. But it's all in jest, and we have fun with each other, poking fun and whatnot. But we want to educate. So your question about evil versus mental illness, I think that's a discussion better left to larger-brained philosophers than I am, but I will introduce a couple of books that I love to read and share with people. So the first one is called Facing Evil, and it's a little bit hard to find, but you can find it on Amazon. It's called Facing Evil, Light at the Core of Darkness, and it's a compilation of various authors who have opined on what they think evil is, on the philosophy or the concept of evil. And the other is called Meeting the Shadow, and the subtitle is The Hidden Power and the Dark Side of Human Nature. And the idea of the shadow is the dark part of us that we don't want to acknowledge. And this is a really deep psychological concept formulated by people like Freud and Jung. Jung wrote a lot about this, and that's, if you're watching, it's Jung, Carl Gustav Jung. He was a big name in our field, and I'm sure most people have heard of Sigmund Freud. But the idea of the shadow is the part of our being that we don't want to acknowledge, but we're really quick to point out in others. And so we may say, you are that thing, and I could never be like that. And then it allows us to label people and box them up and quantify them and set them aside as though we could never be like that, while also discounting what we could be. And there's an old saying that says, if a human being has done something, that thing therefore is human nature. So you, being a human being, therefore also possess the same nature to do whatever it is any other human has done. It's pretty profound. And the idea is that it's not just darkness, there's brightness to that. And Jung would call this the golden shadow. So as quick as we are to cast off, say, sexual deviants or child molesters or violent people, we say, I can never be like them. We're really quick to cast off people who do great things, philanthropists and entrepreneurs and successful individuals say, I can never be like that. And what we're doing is we're selling ourselves short on both ends of that spectrum. What we want to do is we want to encompass the whole thing and say, yeah, I am fully capable of all that is great and terrible. Mindfully aware that I don't want to do terrible things, I want to do great things. Okay, so that opens up the dialogue about what is evil. Evil, in various contexts, means something hideously done that doesn't benefit self, right? It just applies destruction, and there is no greater gain. And I think that's worth dialoguing. But when we pull it back to mental illness, if we're strictly defining it in terms of what is definitional in terms of insurance billing, and I'm putting my hands like this because there's a big giant thick book out there that I left at my office and I didn't bring for this recording. It's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, if you will. And it's currently on its 5th iteration. And in that book contains all the diagnostic criteria for assessing somebody for a mental disorder. And the presumption is you could be mentally ordered or mentally disordered. And a disorder's functional definition is it's life altering. Like it's interfering with how you function. If you're simply down in the dumps for a day and you come back the next day, that's not a mental disorder, that's called life. Right? If you're down in the dumps for many weeks, well, now we got a problem. If it's affecting your work, it's affecting your life, okay, we can maybe roughly call that depression if you meet criteria. And a mental disorder is simply a deficiency in the ability to function in life. So I think sometimes people ask the question in a mass shooting or a suicide, they're like, man, what happened, right? Like, how could they not be mentally deficient if they're taking life? Because taking life sounds evil. And I would submit that, yeah, it is. It is. There's an evil component there. But it goes back to what is your definition of evil, and there's so many definitions of evil. And if we go Judeo-Christian definition of evil, like anti-Christ, where you're opposing the Christ figure of redemption and salvation and being one with God, then yeah, there's a lot of evil stuff. Like if I'm imbibing something that deteriorates my insides, like alcohol or drugs, well, I guess that's evil, right? And evil permeates the world. So then that raises the question of, to what degree are we evaluating evil? Is it a little bit of evil that sort of just deteriorates life a little more rapidly than God intended? Or is it like maximal evil where we're purposely taking life? You know, do I stomp on an ant that's crawling up my shoe? You know, is that evil? Probably.
Right.
Probably, right?
Right. I want to make a point.
Yeah.
Because this is something that has always come up, and it's always made me wonder when we talk about like magazine capacity bans, right? And they say, hey, if we bring it from 17 to 10, right, that will help save lives.
Yeah.
But then my question is, I turn right around and I go, what's your threshold for death?
Right, correct,
Is
correct.
10
correct.
people okay?
Correct. Yeah. That's a really good question. And it's worth asking because it puts people into a bind in this psychological counseling world. We may call it a double bind, where there's two options and neither one is good. Right. So do you stand against liberty or do you stand against death? It's like, well, I don't know. I don't want to pick. I want both to coexist. And then some people weave their way through and land on something that approximates a reasonable outcome that says, I will defend more death by taking a life. Okay, well that's fine, and we can have that conversation. But I think the idea is that at least we're dialoguing, and when we talk about policy and legislation, there's very little dialogue that happens. There's somebody proposes a law, there's a legislative body that wants to pass said law, and they allow some oppositional testimony to come in, but maybe they limit that. Right now we're in the middle of a pandemic and lots of legislative bodies are closed to the public and they limit testimony to 2 minutes a person. Well, I don't know how I can quantify or even articulate my opposition to a law on magazine capacity bans when we're talking about evil in 2 minutes. That seems really, really absurd. So then we get into discussions about governance and who has authority over whom and whatnot. But if we pull it back to the conversation at hand, you know, what's the difference between evil and mental illness? I think the both and exists, and that's a concept called the dialectic. Dialectic is both and, the existence of both you and I talking and discussing something, not either you or I discussing an outcome that we've both made our minds up is going to exist, and we're trying to fight to win. And that would be binary, either or, all or nothing, black or white. The dialectic says black and white can both coexist in gray. All or nothing can coexist in present moment. Like we have all and we have nothing. Like I have no drink in front of me and I know there's a drink waiting inside, right? So like both can coexist in the moment, and that's a dialectic. And I think we're real quick in Western civilization to point to something certain that we can wrap our arms around and say, yes, this is it. Therefore, other things must not exist. And that's really, really challenging when we're talking about how do we govern people. You know, do we govern them heavy-handedly and tell them what they're supposed to do, or do we govern them lightly and allow them to make their decisions, which is super scary because they may make decisions that harm others. Maybe we invite in evil.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing for everyone, even if you're pro-gun or you're anti-gun, to wrap your head around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough thing to understand. And here's one thing that I do know is that regardless of what side of the fence you're on, you don't want to see that happen.
No, you don't. We don't like death, and I think if I could cite multiple religious doctrines, but I'll go back to what I know best, which is Judeo-Christian, which is, God creates life. Life is supposed to live. We're not supposed to take life capriciously. We're not supposed to have the state take life. We're not supposed to take life ourselves, and then we can maybe formulate an opinion that says, well, I'll take a life if it saves lives, right? That's the intellectualization that we get to that justify our life-taking actions. And I don't know that that's actually reasonable either. But what do we go back to? We go back to, well, the earth is plagued with sin, the fall of man, all that stuff, and evil just kind of exists in our reality. So how do we navigate that the best way we can? And then we get back to a debate about, do we allow people to figure it out themselves, or does government come in and tell them how to navigate it? And I don't certainly pretend to know the answer to that. I would advocate that people are pretty intelligent if you give them the education and the knowledge and the information they need to make decisions on their own without having them made for them, certainly what the counseling profession is predicated upon. But it's a very hard concept. I don't think there is an easy answer. And even though people want easy answers because it makes them feel safe and secure, we just don't have them. And that's where people like me come in to say, it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to not know. It's okay to be uncertain. And life will go on. Because civilization has made it this far, I don't think we'd dare to be so arrogant as to think that we have all the answers to know how life will continue to move, or our civilization will continue to move on beyond this, based on one or two or even a myriad of various options or sanctions or legislative policies. We just don't know. There's too many variables.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for any of this. So, for my people in the 2A community, it's important to understand that I know you want an easy way out. I know you want to be able to say, well, what about SSRIs, right? Like the medications that they were, given and these things. And that's not the answer either. We don't want to shame anyone that needs medication to maintain a healthy lifestyle. We also don't want to say, well, it's the breakdown of this, or it's because people aren't religious. Like, you will still have these things happen even if you were to address those things. And that's not an easy pill to swallow.
It's not. And I think even for people in my community who want to just press the button that fixes it, because we don't like seeing people in pain. That's why we do what we do. We want to help people out of their pain. Restricting access to guns isn't the answer.
Right.
It's clearly not the answer, because if you want to stop pain, you'd have to restrict access to everything that causes pain, including one's own mind. How are you going to get in there? This is Minority Report. You kicked off of that. So we also have to be at peace knowing that we can't control everything. Second Amendment community has to be at peace knowing that evil will continue to exist. How do we ameliorate that? My personal philosophy is we love others, and through that modeling of love and forgiveness, we will beget more love and forgiveness, as opposed to the vitriol and the hate and the binary living and the tribalism that we're currently seeing, where people are camped out and they're like, I'm here, but I don't really know where here is, but I know that I don't like that over there. It's like, well, maybe there's some of both. I've regularly said recently that I'm transpartisan. I'm a little bit of liberal, I'm a little bit of conservative, I'm a little bit of libertarian, I'm a little bit of green. Like you can be all things. You can be that dialectic. And I think the more people who slide into that a little bit and go, yeah, we're all humans just trying to walk the earth the best way we can. What's the point? Well, if the point is love, if the point is life, then maybe at some point we all just disarm. That would be awesome, right? No need for guns except for recreation. No need for arrows except for recreation. There's no need for anything that causes destruction except for recreation and hobby. We don't turn them on each other. That'd be ideal. We're not there yet, but we can keep talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you clarifying a few things there. And I want to say that the work that Walk Talk America does is important. Not just because I love it, not because I started the organization, but it's literally about bringing two worlds together and looking for solutions that don't involve legislation, right? It's grassroots, root mitigation action. And I feel like that's important. And if we don't communicate with each other and we don't talk to each other, we're never going to do
stuck.
anything. Yeah, we're never
Yeah.
going to do anything but stand on opposite sides of the room.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate everything you brought to the table in terms of Walk Talk America, and
On behalf of all of us at the organization, and on behalf of the tulips that are in between us, I feel like I'm Zach Galifianakis right now. We're not in between two ferns. We're
Between
two
two-
people
between
flanking
tulips.
tulips. Maybe that's a new podcast. Two people flanking tulips. I thank you all for listening. Please share this around, and if this benefited you, please tell another. Donate if you feel like it. If you're so moved, we certainly could use your resources, because it's just a couple of people doing this on our own, trying to reach others. We wish you all great mental wellness. If you have questions, hit us up at info@wtta.org, and we'll see you in the next video.